There are stories of civilizations destroyed by war, empires burned to ashes, kingdoms shattered by betrayal. But this story is different. Because this one doesn't end with fire. It ends with silence. No screams. No final battle. No records of what went wrong. Just empty cities. Abandoned streets. Where footsteps once echoed. Homes where families once laughed. And walls that still stand today, waiting for someone to understand their story. This is the story of the Indus Valley civilization. A civilization so advanced, so mysterious, that even after thousands of years, long before cities had names, before history was written, before anyone thought of building empires, there was only land. Raw, silent, untouched. And through this silence flowed a river. The Indus. Not just a river, but something alive. It moved with power, with purpose, as if it knew something the world didn't yet understand. At sunrise, its waters shimmered like gold. At night, it whispered in the darkness. A sound. Soft, endless. Almost like a voice. Calling. At first, no one noticed. Small groups of humans wandered across the land. Hunters. Survivors. Always moving. Never staying in one place for long. Because the world was unpredictable. Danger was everywhere. Food was uncertain. And staying in one place felt like a risk. But one day, everything changed. A small group arrived at the banks of the river. Tired. Hungry. Searching for something they couldn't even describe. They looked around. Green land stretched endlessly. The soil rich and soft. Water fresh and flowing. Animals nearby. For the first time in a long time, there was no fear. Only possibility. They stayed. Just for a day at first. Then another. Then a week. And slowly, without realizing it, they made a decision that would change history forever. They stopped moving. It sounds simple. But it wasn't. For generations, movement meant survival. And now, they were choosing to stay. To trust the land. To trust the river. They built small huts. Simple structures. Made of mud, wood, and hope. They planted seeds. Waited. Watched. And when those seeds grew into crops, something inside them changed. For the first time, they weren't just surviving. They were creating. Days turned into months. Months into years. More people came. Drawn by the river. Drawn by something they couldn't explain. And the river. It kept giving. Water. Food. Life. But also something else. A strange sense of rhythm. The river would rise. And fall. Sometimes gently. Sometimes violently. Flooding the land. Then retreating. Leaving behind rich soil. At first, it felt dangerous. Unpredictable. Almost like the river was testing them. Would they stay? Or would they run? Like they always had before? They stayed. They learned its patterns. Adapted. Respected it. Almost as if they understood that the river was not their enemy. It was their teacher. And slowly, a bond formed between humans and nature. But not everything was peaceful. There were nights when the river sounded different, louder, heavier, darker, as if something was wrong. The wind would rise, the sky would turn strange, and the river would overflow, flooding homes, destroying crops, taking away everything. In a single night, people stood there, watching their hard work disappear, helpless, silent, afraid. And in that moment, a question began to grow. Was the river a blessing or a curse? But even after destruction, they didn't leave. Because every time the river took something, it gave something back. Stronger soil, better crops, a chance to rebuild. And maybe that's what made them different. They didn't run from uncertainty. They faced it. They learned from it. They adapted. And that's where the mystery begins. Because this wasn't just survival anymore. This was intelligence, planning, understanding nature in a way no one had before. Years passed. Generations changed. The small settlement was no longer small. More huts appeared. Then more. Then rows of homes. Paths turned into roads. And slowly, without anyone announcing it, without any king declaring it, a civilization was born. But here's the strange part. No one knows exactly how it happened. No records. No written explanation. No single moment we can point to and say, this is when it all began. It's like the civilization emerged silently, like a shadow forming in the light. Gradually, naturally, mysteriously. And the river, it was always there, watching, flowing, guiding. Some say the Indus River didn't just support the civilization. It shaped it, controlled it, even decided its fate. Because the same river that gave them life would one day change. And when it did, everything would begin to fall apart. But that story comes later. For now, picture this: a quiet land, a flowing river, a group of people choosing to stay when the rest of the world kept moving. That single decision, to stop, to trust, to build, was the beginning of one of the greatest and most mysterious civilizations the world has ever known. The river gave them life, but what they built went far beyond survival. At first, it was just a settlement, a cluster of huts, smoke rising slowly into the sky, children running barefoot, people living simple lives. But something was changing. Quietly, slowly. People were no longer just thinking about today. They started thinking about tomorrow. More families arrived. More huts were built. But this time, not randomly. Something strange began to appear. Patterns. Houses were no longer scattered. They were aligned, placed carefully, as if someone invisible was guiding their positions. Paths between huts became straight, not curved, not messy, straight. And that's when the first question arises. Who planned this? Because this wasn't accidental. This wasn't chaos. This was design. Years passed. The huts changed. Mud walls became stronger. Bricks were baked, hardened in fire. Uniform in size. Perfectly shaped. And then, The settlement transformed. It became a city. In places like Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro, something unbelievable took shape. Imagine standing at the edge of one of these cities. The sun rising, light slowly revealing what lies ahead. You expect disorder, ancient chaos. But instead, you see perfection. Wide streets, running straight, intersecting each other at exact angles. Like a grid, like a blueprint. It doesn't feel ancient. It feels modern. Too modern. You walk forward. Every step raises more questions. Houses on both sides, built with the same bricks, same size, same structure. No random design, no confusion. Everything fits. It's as if the entire city was imagined first and then built. But how? There were no advanced machines, no modern tools, no technology like today. And yet, they created something many civilizations couldn't achieve even thousands of years later. Inside the houses, there were rooms, courtyards, wells. Yes, private wells. People had access to water inside their own homes. Think about that. Even today, not everyone has that. Movement. This was no longer just a city. It was a civilization, spreading across a vast region. Alive, thriving, evolving. But every great rise carries the shadow of a fall. And even in its perfection, there were signs. Small, almost invisible. Cracks in walls. Changes in construction. Subtle shifts. Like something was beginning to go wrong. But no one noticed. Or maybe they did, but didn't understand it yet. Because when a civilization is at its peak, it feels unstoppable, permanent. But nothing in history ever is. And these perfect cities, these silent streets, these beautifully planned homes, one day would stand empty. No footsteps, no voices, no life. Only ruins, whispering a question. How did something so perfect disappear? You walk through the city. The streets are calm, orderly, almost too perfect. At first glance, everything looks simple. Bricks, roads, houses. But the real secret is not what you see. It's what lies beneath. Hidden under your feet. Buried beneath layers of brick and earth. There is a system. Silent. Invisible. Brilliant. You don't notice it at first. Because it doesn't demand attention. It works quietly. But once you realize it's there, everything changes. Every house you pass has something unusual. A small opening. A channel. A connection. Not random. Not accidental. Connected. Water from inside the house doesn't just spill outside. It flows. Directed. Controlled. From bathrooms. From washing areas. From daily life. Everything moves into a network. A network that runs beneath the streets. Covered drains. Carefully built. Sealed with precision. No open filth. No overflowing waste. Just movement. Silent movement. The water disappears. As if the city itself is breathing. in and out. Clean and clear. Think about it. Thousands of years ago, when most places struggled with basic hygiene, this civilization had already solved it. But how? Who designed this? Because this isn't just construction. This is engineering. Each drain, built with slope, measured carefully, so water flows naturally. Not too fast, not too slow. Perfect balance. And here's where it becomes even more mysterious. These drains weren't just built once. They were maintained. There are inspection holes, openings, places where someone could check, clean, repair. Which means this wasn't temporary. This was a system designed to last, planned for the future. But who thinks like that? 4,000 years ago? You walk further, and suddenly, you realize something strange. There is no smell, no waste lying around, no signs of decay. The city feels clean, unnaturally clean, as if someone was constantly taking care of it. But again, no signs of authority, no visible rulers. So who ensured this system worked? Was it a group of people? Workers? Engineers? Or was it something deeper? A shared understanding? A discipline followed by everyone? Because a system like this doesn't survive on its own. It requires cooperation, responsibility, order. And that tells us something powerful. This civilization was not just advanced in technology. It was advanced in thinking, in behavior, in awareness. They didn't just build for themselves. They built for everyone. For the city. For the future. But even the most perfect systems have a weakness. They depend on stability. And stability doesn't last forever. Imagine this. The river changes. Water levels drop. Supply becomes uncertain. The drains that once carried water away now sit dry. Or worse, overflow in unexpected ways. The balance breaks. And when the balance breaks, the system begins to fail. Slowly, silently, just like it was built. Because something so quiet doesn't collapse loudly. It fades. One blocked drain, one broken channel, one small failure at a time, until the system that once made the city perfect becomes useless. And when that happens, the city itself starts to change. Clean streets turn dusty. Order turns into neglect. And the people who once trusted this invisible system begin to lose that trust. Because when something you depend on stops working, fear begins. Doubt begins. And that's how civilizations fall. Not always with war. Not always with fire. Sometimes with something as silent as a blocked drain. And somewhere deep beneath the ruins of Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa, that system still exists. Broken, silent, forgotten, waiting for someone to understand how something so advanced was built so long ago, and why it couldn't save them in the end. You walk deeper into the city, past the straight roads, past the silent houses, past the hidden drains, and then You see it. Something different. It doesn't look like a home. Not a market. Not a street. It stands alone. Still. Massive. Almost sacred. In the heart of Mohenjo-Daro. There is a structure that refuses to explain itself. The Great Bath. At first glance, it's just a pool. A large rectangular tank, surrounded by thick brick walls. But the moment you look closer, you realize this is no ordinary structure. Every brick, placed with precision. Every corner, perfectly aligned. The floor, sealed so tightly that not a single drop of water could escape. Think about that. Thousands of years ago, they built something waterproof. How did they know? How did they understand materials so deeply, so perfectly? You step closer. Stone steps lead down into the water. Not rough, not uneven, smooth, carefully crafted, as if they expected people to enter slowly, respectfully, almost ritually. Around the bath, there are rooms, small, enclosed, changing rooms, resting areas, preparation spaces. No one knows. And that's where the mystery begins. Because this structure is too advanced, too important, to be random. It had a purpose. A powerful one. But what? There are no carvings. No written records. No explanation. Only silence. Some believe it was used for purification. A place where people came to wash away not just dirt, but something deeper. Sins, impurities, negative energy. Imagine this. The sun is setting. The sky turning orange. Then slowly, dark. People gather. Quiet. Serious. No noise. No laughter. They step down, one by one, into the water. Cold. Still. Reflecting the sky above. And for a moment, everything stops. No city sounds. No movement. Just water. And breath. What were they thinking? What were they feeling? Were they praying? Cleansing? Preparing for something? Or hiding something behind this ritual? Because sometimes rituals are not just about belief. They are about control, order, unity. And maybe this bath was more than a place. Maybe it was the center of their society. A place where people connected, not just physically, but spiritually. But here's the strange part. If this was so important, where are the temples? Other civilizations built massive temples, huge statues, grand monuments to their gods. But here, there is nothing like that. No clear religion. No visible gods. Only symbols. And this one structure. The Great Bath. It feels like a clue. A piece of a puzzle. That's missing everything else. And that creates tension. Because it suggests something we don't fully understand. A belief system without evidence. A ritual without explanation. A purpose lost in time. And then there's another possibility. What if this wasn't just about religion? What if it was about power? Not the kind of power you show with crowns and armies, but a different kind. Silent, influential, hidden. What if only certain people were allowed inside? What if this place separated the ordinary from the important? But again, no proof, no confirmation, only questions. And that's what makes it powerful. Because the more you look at it, the less you understand. And the less you understand, the more it pulls you in. Even today, the Great Bath still exists. Broken, empty, no water, no people, no rituals, just a structure, standing in silence, as if it's waiting for someone to finally understand its purpose. But maybe that answer is already lost, buried somewhere with the people who built it. And maybe that's the most haunting part, because this wasn't just a pool. It was something important, something meaningful, something powerful. And yet, we don't know what. Only this. Once, people stood here, stepped into the water, believed in something, and now, all that remains is silence. In most ancient worlds, power was loud. Kings sat on thrones. Armies marched across lands. Palaces rose above cities, reminding everyone who was in control. But here, something feels wrong. You walk through the ruins of Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro, looking for that same pattern. A grand palace, a royal court, a massive statue of a ruler. But you find nothing. No throne rooms, no giant monuments of kings, no carvings celebrating victories. Just houses, streets, silence. It doesn't make sense. Because a civilization this advanced, this organized, this perfectly planned, should have had a ruler. Someone must have given orders. Someone must have controlled the system. Someone must have decided where roads go, how drains are built, how cities expand. But where is that person? Why is there no trace? You look closer. The houses, they are different in size, but not extremely different. No massive mansions, no overwhelming luxury, no clear separation between rich and poor. It feels balanced, too balanced. And that raises a dangerous question. What if there were no kings at all? What if this civilization didn't run on power, but on cooperation? It sounds impossible. Because history teaches us large societies need control, rules, authority. But here, everything works without visible authority. The drainage system works. The city planning works. Trade works. Daily life works. All without a king. Or at least, without evidence of one. And that creates a deeper mystery. Because there are only two possibilities. Possibility 1, they truly had no kings. A society where decisions were shared, where people followed systems, not individuals. A kind of balance so rare that even today we struggle to achieve it. If this is true, then this civilization wasn't just advanced in engineering. It was advanced in thinking, far ahead of its time. But then comes the second possibility. Possibility 2, the power was hidden. What if there were rulers, but they didn't show themselves? No statues, no grand palaces. Power hidden behind systems, behind order, behind silence. What if control wasn't visible, but still present? A small group, guiding everything, deciding everything, without ever being seen. And that possibility feels even more unsettling, because invisible power is harder to understand, harder to challenge, harder to detect. You walk through the city again, trying to find clues. Maybe a building, slightly larger than the others. Maybe a structure that hints at importance. You do find some larger platforms, raised areas, but nothing clearly royal. Nothing that screams, "This is where the ruler lived." And that silence becomes louder, because it shouldn't be this quiet. A civilization of thousands, possibly millions of people, and not a single clear king? It almost feels like something is missing, or something was intentionally left out. And then another thought appears. What if their idea of power was completely different? Not about showing strength, not about domination, but about maintaining balance. What if leadership was not about being above others, but being among them? If that's true, then this civilization was not just unique, it was revolutionary. But here's where the suspense deepens. Because if there were no strong rulers, no centralized power, then what happened? When things started going wrong? When rivers changed? When crops failed? When systems began to break? Who made the decisions? Who led the people? Who told them what to do? Or did no one? Because a system without a strong center can be stable in peace, but fragile in crisis. And maybe that was the hidden weakness. The same balance that made them strong might have made them vulnerable. Because when trouble came, there was no king to command, no leader to unite, only people trying to survive. And sometimes that's not enough. Today, as we stand among the ruins of Mohenjo-Daro, we still ask the same question. Who ruled this civilization? And maybe the most mysterious answer is no one and everyone. A civilization built not on power, but on balance. And in the end, that balance may have been both its greatest strength and its greatest weakness. Long before cities had names, before history was written, before anyone thought of building empires, there was only land, raw, silent, untouched. And through this silence flowed a river, the Indus. Not just a river, but something alive. It moved with power, with purpose, as if it knew something the world didn't yet understand. At sunrise, its waters shimmered like gold. At night, it whispered in the darkness. A sound, soft, endless, almost like a voice, calling. At first, no one noticed. Small groups of humans wandered across the land. Hunters, survivors, always moving, never staying in one place for long. Because the world was unpredictable. Danger was everywhere. Food was uncertain. And staying in one place felt like a risk. But one day, everything changed. A small group arrived at the banks of the river. Tired. Hungry. Searching for something they couldn't even describe. They looked around. Greenland stretched endlessly. The soil rich and soft. Water fresh and flowing. Animals nearby. For the first time in a long time, there was no fear. Only possibility. They stayed. Just for a day at first. Then another. Then a week. And slowly, without realizing it, they made a decision that would change history forever. They stopped moving. It sounds simple, but it wasn't. For generations, movement meant survival. And now, they were choosing to stay. To trust the land. To trust the river. They built small huts. Simple structures. Made of mud, wood, and hope. They planted seeds. Waited. Watched. And when those seeds grew into crops, something inside them changed. For the first time, they weren't just surviving. They were creating. Days turned into months. Months into years. More people came. Drawn by the river. Drawn by something they couldn't explain. And the river. It kept giving. Water. Food. Life. But also something else. A strange sense of rhythm. The river would rise. And fall. Sometimes gently. Sometimes violently. Flooding the land. Then retreating. Leaving. In the ruins of a lost world. Among broken walls. Dust. And silence. Something small was found. Not a weapon. Not a monument. A seal. Just a small piece of stone. Cold. Silent. Easy to miss. But on its surface were markings. Strange symbols. Carefully carved. Precise. Intentional. At first glance, they look simple. A few lines. Shapes. Figures. Sometimes an animal. A bull. A unicorn-like creature. And above it, symbols. Repeated again. And again. Across hundreds of seals. Which means one thing. This wasn't random. This was a language. A way to communicate. To record. To remember. Somewhere in those symbols are names. Stories. Possibly even warnings. But here's the truth. No one can read them. Not historians. Not linguists. Not even modern technology. Thousands of years later, we are still staring at those symbols. Like strangers. Imagine that for a moment. A civilization. Trying to speak to us. From the past. And we cannot understand a single word. It's like hearing a voice. Through a wall. You know someone is there. You know they are saying something important. But the meaning never reaches you. That's what makes this so powerful. Because this isn't just a lost language. It's a lost connection. Between them and us. You hold one of those seals in your hand. You trace the carvings. Feel the grooves. Someone made this. Carefully. Patiently. Maybe a craftsman. Sitting in a workshop in Harappa. Or Mohenjo-daro. Carving each symbol. With purpose. But why? Was it a name? Ownership? A message? Or something deeper? Something we still don't understand? Because these symbols are short. Very short. Not long sentences. Not full stories. Just brief markings. Almost like codes. Or identifiers. Which makes it even more mysterious. Because usually, civilizations write more. Laws. Stories. History. But here, we get fragments. Tiny pieces. As if someone started writing, but never finished. Or maybe, they wrote on something else. Something that didn't survive. Cloth. Wood. Leaves. Things that time can destroy. And if that's true, then what we're seeing today is only a small part of a much bigger story. A story that's mostly gone. And that thought is unsettling, because it means the answers might have existed once. We just lost them. Forever. Researchers have tried everything. Comparing symbols. Analyzing patterns. Using AI. Trying to crack the code. But every time they get close, it slips away. Like a puzzle. Missing its final piece. And sometimes, it feels like the script doesn't want to be understood. Like it's protecting something. Or hiding something. What if those symbols contain the truth? About their rulers. Their beliefs. Their disappearance. What if the answer to everything is already written? Right in front of us? But locked. And we don't have the key. That's the most haunting part. Because we are not just looking at ruins. We are looking at a message. A message sent across 4,000 years. And we are failing to read it. Somewhere, a person once pressed that seal into clay. Marked something as theirs. Maybe they believed it would last forever. That someone, someday, would understand it. But today, it remains silent. Not because it has nothing to say, but because we don't know how to listen. And maybe that silence is the biggest mystery of all. Because history didn't just forget them. It lost their voice. And without a voice, even the greatest civilization becomes a mystery. At first, it seemed like this civilization was alone. A world of its own. Cities rising near rivers. People living in balance. Everything self-sufficient. But that illusion doesn't last. Because somewhere, far beyond these cities, across deserts, across mountains, across unknown lands, other civilizations existed. And slowly, quietly, connections began. Not through war, not through conquest, but through something more powerful. Trade. Imagine this. A craftsman in Mohenjo-daro, sitting in his workshop, carefully shaping beads. Tiny. Perfect. Stone polished until it shines. Each piece made with patience. Skill. Time. But he's not making it just for himself. Or even for his city. He's making it for someone he will never meet. Hundreds, maybe thousands of kilometers away. Because these objects didn't stay here. They traveled across rivers, loaded onto boats, through dangerous paths, carried by traders, into distant lands like Mesopotamia. And there, someone else held that same bead. A different language, a different culture, but connected through a single object. Think about that. Two civilizations, separated by distance, by identity, by unknown differences. Yet somehow connected, without phones, without maps, without modern navigation. How did they do it? How did they know where to go? How did they trust strangers in lands they had never seen? That's where the mystery deepens. Because trade requires more than goods. It requires trust, understanding, systems. Weights and measures were found, standardized, which means they didn't just trade randomly. They had rules, a system, a structure that ensured fairness. But who created these rules? Again, no clear rulers, no visible authority. Yet everything worked. Goods moved smoothly. Trade flourished. It's as if the civilization itself functioned like a silent machine, perfectly balanced. They exported cotton, beads, pottery, things made with care. And in return, they received metals, precious stones, resources they didn't have. Which means they understood value, demand, exchange, concepts we use even today. But here's where the emotion hits. Because every object that left the city carried a part of them, their skill, their culture, their identity, traveling far away into unknown worlds. And every object that came in brought something new, new ideas, new influences. This wasn't just trade. This was connection. A civilization reaching out without ever leaving its roots. But connections can also bring risk. Because when you depend on trade, you depend on stability. Routes must remain open. Partners must survive. And what happens when something changes? When rivers shift. When paths become dangerous. When distant civilizations fall. The network breaks. And when the network breaks, the impact spreads. Slowly. Silently. Like a crack in glass. At first, it's small. Barely noticeable. But over time, it grows. Until everything shatters. Trade stops. Goods stop moving. Resources become scarce. And a civilization that once thrived on connection starts to feel isolated, cut off. And that isolation can be dangerous because growth depends on exchange. And when exchange stops, so does progress, so does balance. And maybe this vast trade network, this invisible connection to the world, was not just their strength, but also a hidden weakness. Because when the world around them changed, they couldn't control it. And slowly, that change began to reach them too. Today, archaeologists find Indus Valley artifacts in distant lands. Proof that they were never alone, that they were part of something bigger. A global system, before the world even knew what global meant. And yet, despite all these connections, when they disappeared, no one came looking. No one recorded their fall. No one wrote their ending. It's as if even the world they were connected to forgot them. And that's the final mystery. A civilization so connected, so advanced, so aware of the world, still vanished, without a trace, as if their connections couldn't save them. In the end, for years, everything worked. The cities thrived. The streets stayed clean. Trade flowed. Life moved in perfect rhythm. It felt unbreakable. But history has a pattern. The stronger something looks, the more invisible its weaknesses can be. At first, the change was small. So small, no one noticed. The river didn't flow the same way. Its rhythm changed. Water levels dropped. Then suddenly rose. Unpredictable. Fields that once grew crops easily began to struggle. Farmers stood in silence, looking at the land, waiting, hoping. But the harvest wasn't the same. Something was wrong. But no one understood what. Because there was no sudden disaster. No massive war. No invasion. Just slow change. Silent change. The kind of change that creeps in quietly and stays. Some believe a great river, possibly the Sarasvati, started to dry. If that's true, then entire regions lost their main source of water. Think about that. A civilization built around rivers, losing its lifeline. Not in a single moment, but slowly, year by year. And when water disappears, everything follows. Crops fail. Food becomes scarce. People begin to worry. Not panic. Not yet. But worry. Because they had never faced this before. Their system, their planning, their balance, it all depended on stability. And now, stability was breaking. At the same time, floods may have struck certain areas, destroying homes, damaging cities like Mohenjo-Daro. Imagine that contrast. One region drying, another flooding. Too little water, too much water. Both dangerous, both uncontrollable. And the people were caught in between. The drainage systems that once worked perfectly began to fail under pressure. Either too dry or overwhelmed. The balance was gone. And when systems fail, confidence breaks. People start to doubt. Whispers begin. Something is wrong. Why is this happening? But there were no answers. No written warnings. No leaders guiding them clearly. Only confusion. And then, another change. Trade began to slow. Routes became harder. Connections weaker. Goods stopped arriving. Resources became limited. And now, the pressure was everywhere. Food, water, trade, system, everything. Slowly weakening. Families began to make difficult choices. Do we stay? Or do we leave? At first, only a few left. Quietly. Without announcement. They moved. Searching for better land. Better water. Better chances. But when others saw this, doubt turned into fear. Because if people are leaving, it means something is seriously wrong. And slowly, more followed. Not in chaos. Not in panic. But in silence. Homes were abandoned. Not destroyed. Not burned. Just left behind. Tools left where they were last used. Pottery left unfinished. Toys forgotten. As if people believed they might return. But they didn't. The great cities, once full of life, began to empty. Streets that echoed with footsteps became silent. Doors stayed closed. Wells went unused. The great bath stood still. No rituals. No gatherings. Only emptiness. And the most haunting part is, there was no final moment. No single day where everything ended. It just faded. Slowly. Quietly. Like a story that loses its voice before it reaches the end. Even today, standing in the ruins of Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro, you don't feel destruction. You feel absence. And that's more unsettling. Because destruction tells a story. But silence hides it. We still ask, was it climate? Rivers? Floods? Drought? Or a combination of everything? We may never know. And maybe that's what makes this civilization so mysterious. Because it didn't fall loudly. It disappeared quietly. And in that silence, it took its secrets with it. Every great civilization has an ending. Some end in fire. Empires collapse in war. Cities burn. Kings fall. History remembers them because they were loud. But this one is different because it didn't end with noise. It ended with silence. Imagine this. You walk through the streets of Mohenjo-Daro. But this time, there are no people. No footsteps. No voices. The same streets that once echoed with life now stand still. Doors remain closed. Homes empty. Walls unchanged. As if time itself stopped moving. You step into a house. There's no destruction. No signs of violence. Just absence. A place where someone once lived. Ate. Slept. Dreamed. Now, nothing. A pot sits in the corner. Untouched. A tool lies on the ground. Never picked up again. It doesn't feel like a disaster. It feels like people simply left and never returned. You walk further. The great bath appears again. Once filled with water. With meaning. With rituals. Now dry. Empty. Silent. Whatever purpose it once held is gone. And no one is left to explain it. This is what makes the ending so haunting. Because there is no final chapter. No written record saying, this is why we left. No warning. No goodbye. Just disappearance. A civilization that slowly faded until it was gone. Nature took over. Dust covered the streets. Wind erased footprints. Rivers changed their paths. And over time, the world forgot. Forgot that these cities ever existed. Forgot that millions of people once lived here. Forgot their language. Their stories. Their identity. For thousands of years, they were gone. Completely. Until one day, humans returned. Not the same people. Not the same civilization. But explorers. Archaeologists. Digging into the earth. Uncovering bricks. Walls. Streets. And slowly, the past came back to life. But only partially. Because what we found were structures, not answers. We saw how they lived. but not why they disappeared. We saw their cities, but not their final moments. And maybe that's something we will never know. Because some stories don't want to be fully told. They leave gaps, mysteries, silence. And maybe that silence is the message. Because not every civilization ends with a lesson. Some end as a warning, a reminder that no matter how advanced, how organized, how powerful, nothing is permanent. Even the most perfect systems can fail. Even the greatest cities can become ruins. And even millions of people can disappear without leaving behind their voice. Today, as we stand among the ruins of Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro, we don't just see history. We feel it. In the silence. In the emptiness. In the unanswered questions. Because this wasn't just a civilization. It was a world. A world that lived, thrived, connected, believed, and then vanished. Not in chaos, not in destruction, but in quiet disappearance. And maybe that's why it still fascinates us today. Because deep down, we are still asking, what really happened? And until we find the answer, the Indus Valley civilization will remain not just history, but a mystery, a story that ended in silence.